I'm 90 years old, and my brother hasn't heard my voice in 17 years. The last thing I ever said to him was, "I don't need to steal from my own family." He stood in our mother's kitchen after that and waited. I thought he was waiting for an apology. I was wrong, and it shaped the rest of my life. My name is Harold Whitaker. I turned 90 in March. 90 sounds solid when you say it out loud. Finished, like a book placed back on a shelf. But there's a page in mine that never turned. The hallway outside my room smells faintly of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. The nurse tells me I repeat myself. Maybe I do. At this age, the past feels closer than yesterday. When I close my eyes, I'm back in 1968. Soap on my mother's hands, coffee cooling in a chip mug. Late afternoon light stretched thin across the counter. That was the year Daniel walked out of my life. He was 3 years younger than me. Darker hair, faster temper, quicker laugh. He could fill a room without saying much at all, especially when he was disappointed. Our father had just passed. The will was simple. Sell the house. Split the money evenly. Daniel believed I had convinced our mother to let me handle the paperwork so I could quietly take more than my share. I hadn't. But I also hadn't asked him to sit down beside me and look through everything together. I handled it alone. Signed the documents. Moved the money where it belonged. I assumed fairness would speak for itself. It didn't. He looked me in that kitchen and said, "You've always needed to win, Harold." I remember the feeling in my chest, not guilt, not exactly anger, just a strong need to defend myself. And I said, "I don't need to steal from my own family." It wasn't what I meant. What I meant was that I would never betray him. But that isn't what came out. He stared at me like I had just confirmed something he feared, and then he waited. There was a silence in that kitchen that lasted maybe 5 seconds. Those 5 seconds stretched into 40 years. He left before dinner. I told myself he would cool down. A week, maybe 2. He would call. He would apologize. After all, he had accused me. I even rehearsed how I would respond. Calm, reasonable, generous. Months passed, then a year. That first Christmas, our mother set 2 extra places at the table. Daniel didn't come. I pretended not to see how long she stood at the window. Time has a way of hardening things. A misunderstanding becomes a position becomes a story becomes a wall. I married, had children, worked long hours at the mill. Life filled the space where my brother used to be, but there were moments he slipped back in. When my first daughter was born, I picked up the phone. I dialed the first 3 numbers of his house. I could almost hear his voice teasing me about becoming a father. Then I stopped. He hadn't apologized. That was a rule I never said out loud. He had walked out. He had accused me. He would be the one to come back. Every year I waited felt justified at the time. At night, though, I didn't replay the whole argument, just the end. The way he stood there, the way his shoulders dropped slightly before he turned toward the door. For years I believed he was waiting for me to admit I'd done something wrong. I understand now that I misunderstood the entire moment. Our mother died in 1989. At her service, I scanned every face, even the unfamiliar ones. I imagined him standing at the back, older, thinner, hands in his pockets. He wasn't there. After everyone left, I stood by the graveside longer than necessary. I felt something settle inside me. Not loudly, just quietly, like a door easing shut. I still didn't call. I told myself too much time had passed, that it would be awkward, that we were both too set in our ways. Those reasons sounded sensible. They also kept me exactly where I was. When I was 73, a letter arrived from a different state. The handwriting was unfamiliar at first. It was from his daughter. She wrote that her father had passed away the previous winter, heart trouble, quick at the end. There was one sentence in that letter that changed everything for me. She said she had found old photographs in his desk drawer of us as boys fishing at the lake, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of our narrow childhood home. He had kept them. All those years, I built a version of him in my mind, a man too stubborn to reach back, too proud to fix what broke, but he had kept the photographs. He had kept me. And that is when I finally understood what he was waiting for in that kitchen. Not an apology, a sign, a step, a choice. He was waiting for me to choose him over being right. Just once. If I had said, let's look at it together. If I had said, I don't want this between us. If I had taken one small step forward instead of folding my arms, the next 40 years might have looked different. Instead, I stood still. Waiting felt strong at the time. It felt principled, like I was protecting my dignity. But here's the truth I learned too late. Waiting to be right cost me my brother. I thought silence would preserve respect. I thought holding my ground made me steady. All it did was create distance that grew wider each year. Time does not pause while we hold our ground. It keeps moving. It moves through birthdays, through funerals, through children growing up and parents growing old. And one day it moves past the last chance to speak. Now I sit in this small room with my 90 years behind me, and I understand something simple. Sometimes the smallest step is the one that saves everything. And sometimes the silence we defend becomes the thing we regret the most. If there is someone in your life standing in a quiet kitchen somewhere, waiting, don't assume you know what they're waiting for. I did, and I was wrong, and time did what time always does. It moved on without us.